The champagne glass shattered against the marble floor before I even realized I'd dropped it. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me as my mother's voice echoed through the Vantage Holdings headquarters. Her words detonating like grenades in the middle of my celebration. As co-founder of Vantage Holdings, I'm restructuring this company for the Vance family's benefit. The 510 Park Avenue building will be divided among us. Co-founder. The word ricocheted through my skull. I'd bought her out 8 years ago. I had the documents. I had her signature. I had proof that she owned nothing. That she was entitled to nothing. That this company was mine and mine alone. But there she stood on my stage. In front of my investors. My partners. Every journalist who mattered in New York real estate, claiming ownership of the $49 million building I just won at auction 2 weeks ago. My brother Leo was already unrolling blueprints across my display table like he owned the place. His finger stabbing at the 3rd floor. My art studio goes here. My sister Chloe was squealing about converting the 2nd floor into a playroom for her kids. They were dividing up my empire like vultures over a corpse. Except I wasn't dead yet. The worst part, they were smiling. All 3 of them wore these identical triunfansmiles. Like they'd just pulled off the heist of the century. And maybe they had, because in that moment, watching my life's work get carved up in real time while cameras flashed, and my reputation bled out onto social media, I realized something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. This was an ambush. And I'd walked right into it. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story of standing up against family betrayal and reclaiming what's rightfully yours, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and justice, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Your support means everything. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. Because the truth is, I should have seen it coming. 8 years ago, I was a 24-year-old with a dream and a business degree from Columbia. I wanted to build something real. Something tangible. While my friends were chasing positions at investment banks, I was obsessed with the New York real estate market. I saw opportunity where others saw risk. My thesis advisor told me I was crazy to start a commercial real estate company right out of college. But I'd never been good at listening to people who told me what I couldn't do. The problem was capital. I had $50. 0 inches savings from 3 years of brutal consulting work, living in a shoebox apartment in Queens, eating ramen more nights than I care to remember. It wasn't enough. Not even close. I needed $150. 000 to make my first acquisition. A distressed property in Brooklyn that I knew I could flip. That's when my mother made her offer. Eleanor Vance had always been a complicated woman. On the surface, she was the picture of maternal devotion. She baked cookies for school fundraisers, attended every recital, every game. But there was always a transaction underneath. Her love came with invisible price tags. I was too young to read. "Darling," she'd said over brunch at her favorite Upper East Side bistro, reaching across the white tablecloth to pat my hand. "I want to help you. Family should support family. I'll put up $15. Ling ling ling. And I'll co-sign for a business loan for the rest. But Alexandra, I need you to understand something. This makes me a co-founder. We're building this together." I should have questioned it. I should have gotten everything in writing, consulted a lawyer, protected myself. But I was 24. Desperate. And she was my mother. I signed the papers she put in front of me. Eleanor Vance became the co-founder of Vantage Holdings. Even though her actual contribution was a small loan and her signature on a bank document, the Brooklyn property was a success. I poured everything I had into renovating it, finding tenants, managing every detail myself. Within 18 months, I'd sold it for 3 times what I paid. I gave my mother back her $15. 000 plus interest. I thought we were square, but Eleanor saw something else. She saw dollar signs. She started showing up at my office, which was really just a desk in a co-working space in Manhattan. She'd bring Leo and Chloe, introducing them to my contacts, my potential investors. "We're all in this together," she'd say with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Leo was 30 then, a struggling painter who'd burned through 3 trust funds from our late grandmother. His art was mediocre at best, derivative at worst. but he had the Vance charm and the ability to convince people that his lack of success was everyone else's failure to understand his vision. Chloe was 28, married to a finance guy named Brad who made decent money, but not enough to support her Instagram lifestyle and her 2 young children's private school tuition. I started to notice things. Small things at first. Eleanor would mention my business plans at family dinners. And suddenly Leo would have an idea for how I could help him by renting him studio space at cost. Chloe would joke about how nice it would be to have an office in Manhattan where she could escape the kids. I laughed it off. I was busy building an empire. By the time I was 28, Vantage Holdings had acquired and successfully managed 12 properties across New York. I'd built a team. Sophia Chen became my right hand. A Harvard MBA with a gift for strategy, and an even better gift for reading people. Marcus Thorne was my attorney, a bulldog in a Brooks Brothers suit who'd left a major firm to work with me because he believed in what I was building. I bought out Eleanor's co-founder stake. I have the documents, notarized and filed with the state, removing her name from every ownership paper. I wrote her a check for $15, 000, plus $8, 500 inches interest, far more than our agreement required. She signed. She smiled. She said she was proud of me, but she never really let go. Family dinners became interrogations about my business. Eleanor wanted to know about every deal, every investor, every plan. When I tried to keep things private, she'd get hurt. "I'm your mother, Alexandra. Why are you shutting me out after everything I did to help you get started?" The guilt was a constant weight. In my culture, in my world, you don't cut off your mother. You don't tell her no. You certainly don't accuse her of anything inappropriate. So I shared more than I should have. I introduced her to my accountant when she said she needed advice on her own investments. I let her sit in on meetings when she asked. I was building something beautiful, and I wanted her to see it. To finally be proud of me without conditions. Leo's studio space request turned into demands. He needed somewhere to work, somewhere with good light, somewhere impressive enough to attract gallery owners. I gave him space in one of my buildings at a fraction of market rate. He paid rent for 3 months, then stopped. When I asked him about it, Eleanor called me. "Your brother is going through a difficult time. His art isn't selling. Can't you just help him out? You have so much." Chloe needed an office for her business, which seemed to consist mainly of taking photos of herself and scheduling playdates. I gave her space too. She never paid a dime. I was being bled slowly. So slowly I almost didn't notice. $1,000 here, 5,000 there. Always with a story about how hard things were, how much they needed it, how successful I was, and how little it would hurt me to help. But I noticed. Sophia noticed. Marcus definitely noticed. "Alex," Sophia said one Thursday evening as we reviewed quarterly reports, "you're subsidizing your entire family. Your brother owes you $47. 0 inches back rent. Your sister has never paid rent at all. Your mother has her hand in your networking events, taking credit for your success with potential investors." I made excuses. "It's complicated. They're family." Marcus was less diplomatic. "They're parasites. And the longer you let this continue, the harder it will be to cut them off." I should have listened, but I was 31. Vantage Holdings was thriving, and I told myself I could afford to be generous. I told myself that success meant being able to take care of the people you love. Then came the opportunity of a lifetime. 510 Park Avenue, a landmark building in Manhattan. Prime location. 20 floors of commercial real estate gold. The current owner was retiring, and the property was going to auction. This wasn't just another acquisition. This was the crown jewel. This was the building that would transform Vantage Holdings from a successful local company into a major player in the New York real estate market. I spent 6 months preparing. Financial modeling. Investor presentations. Securing commitments. The auction was set for a Friday afternoon in October. I remember the morning perfectly. Crisp autumn air. Leaves turning gold in Central Park. The smell of possibility in the air. I wore my favorite navy suit, the one I'd bought when I closed my first $1 million deal. The auction house was packed. I recognized most of the serious players. Real estate developers with decades of experience. Investment firms with billions in assets. I wasn't intimidated. I'd done my homework. I knew exactly how high I could go and still make the numbers work. The bidding started at 20 million. Within minutes, it was at 35. I stayed calm, raising my paddle at strategic moments, watching my competitors drop out one by one. By the time we hit 42 million, there were only 3 bidders left. Me, a hedge fund manager I'd competed against before, and someone I couldn't quite see in the back of the room. 43 million. 44. The hedge fund manager shook his head and lowered his paddle. It was down to me and the mystery bidder. 45 million. I raised my paddle. 46 million. The other bidder countered immediately. Something felt wrong. The bidding pattern was aggressive, almost reckless, designed to drive up the price rather than win strategically. 47 million. I could feel sweat beading at my hairline. This was approaching my absolute ceiling. 48 million. The mystery bidder didn't hesitate. I took a breath and raised my paddle. 49 million. Silence. The auctioneer looked to the back of the room. 49 million going once. Going twice. I won. Relief flooded through me. I'd done it. The crown jewel was mine. I stood, turning to see who I'd been bidding against. And that's when I saw them. Eleanor, Leo, and Chloe, sitting together in the back row. My mother was smiling that smile. Not the proud mother smile. The other one. The one that said she knew something I didn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Are you seeing this? Your mother just tried to buy your building. I walked over to them, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The room was still buzzing with post-auction energy. People congratulating me. But all I could hear was white noise. Mom, I said quietly. What are you doing here? Eleanor stood, smoothing her Chanel jacket, supporting my daughter. Of course. Though I have to say, darling, you paid too much. I was just trying to keep you from making a mistake. Leo smirked. Yeah. Sis, that's a lot of money for a building. Every instinct screamed at me to cause a scene, to demand answers. But I was in public, surrounded by people who mattered to my business. I smiled, thanked them for coming, and turned away. Sophia grabbed my arm as soon as I was clear. Tell me. You see what's happening. They were driving up the price, I said slowly, the pieces clicking together. They wanted me to pay more. Or they wanted to see how high you'd go. Alex, this is reconnaissance. They're planning something. I should have confronted them then. I should have asked what the hell they were playing at. But I was riding high on victory, and I told myself Sophia was being paranoid. My family was dysfunctional. Sure. But they wouldn't actively sabotage me. God. I was naive. 2 weeks later, I organized a celebration party at Vantage Holdings headquarters. It was going to be perfect. We transformed the main conference space into an elegant evening venue, with champagne towers, a jazz quartet, uplighting that made the whole room glow. I'd invited everyone who mattered: investors, partners, journalists from the major real estate publications. This was my moment to shine. To announce that Vantage Holdings was moving its headquarters to 510 Park Avenue, I invited my family too. Of course I did. Despite everything, despite the weirdness at the auction, they were still my family. I wanted them there. Some pathetic part of me still wanted Eleanor to be proud. The party was magical. People kept congratulating me, taking photos, talking about the future. Sophia had arranged for a videographer to capture the evening for promotional materials. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. I was mid-speech, standing on the small stage we'd set up, talking about vision and growth and the future of Vantage Holdings. When I saw Eleanor making her way toward me, she was dressed impeccably, as always, in a cream silk suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Excuse me, darling, she said, reaching for my microphone with a smile that made my blood run cold. May I say a few words? What was I supposed to do? Say no to my mother in front of 200 people? I handed her the microphone. That's when my world exploded. The words co-founder hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't heard that term applied to Eleanor in 8 years. Not since I'd bought her out. Paid her back. filed the paperwork removing her from any ownership stake in my company. But here she was, in front of everyone who mattered to my career, claiming credit for my success and announcing plans to restructure my company for the benefit of the Vance family. Leo unrolled his blueprints. Chloe squealed about her playroom. Eleanor kept talking about shared family assets and clear divisions. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. This was a hostile takeover happening in real time at my own party. My guests were looking at me with confusion, with pity, with the dawning realization that they might have invested in a company with serious ownership disputes. Sophia appeared at my elbow. Alex, we need to shut this down. Now, I found my voice. Security. What Eleanor looked genuinely surprised, as if she couldn't imagine I'd actually stop her. Security, I repeated. Louder. Please escort the Vance family off the premises. All of them. Immediately, the room went dead silent. Even the jazz quartet stopped playing. Alexandra. Eleanor's voice took on that wounded mother tone that had worked on me for 31 years. How can you do this? In front of all these people, I'm your mother. You're also making false claims of ownership in my company, I said, and I was amazed at how steady my voice sounded when my insides were screaming. You're not a co-founder. You haven't been for 8 years. You signed documents removing yourself from any ownership stake. I have those documents, notarized and filed. Whatever you think you're doing here, it stops now. Leo's face flushed red. This is bullshit. Alex, we're family. Then you should have acted like it. Security arrived. Professional and discreet, but unmistakable in their intent. My family was escorted out. Eleanor protesting the entire way. Chloe crying. Leo calling me names I won't repeat. The journalist's cameras never stopped flashing. As soon as the door closed behind them, I turned to my guests. My career might have just ended. My reputation might be destroyed. But I'd be damned if I'd let them take my company without a fight. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the shocked silence, I apologize for that disruption. What you just witnessed was a failed attempt at fraud and manipulation. Vantage Holdings has no co-founders except myself. All ownership documents are properly filed and publicly available. Now, shall we have some champagne? It was the ballsiest thing I'd ever done. About half the guests left immediately, but the other half stayed. And the looks on their faces weren't pity anymore. They were respect. Sophia and Marcus met me in my office at midnight. After the last guests had finally left and the cleaning crew was taking down the decorations, they're going to come at you, Marcus said without preamble. This was a public play. They're not going to back down quietly. Let them come, I said. And I meant it. Something had broken in me during that confrontation. The part that still wanted my mother's approval, that still felt guilty for my success, that still believed family meant unconditional support. It was gone, burned away in the glare of those camera flashes and Eleanor's fake tears. We need to go on offense, Sophia said. They controlled the narrative tonight. We need to take it back. We worked through the night, building our strategy. By dawn, we had a plan. First, we'd secure 510 Park Avenue. Not just change the locks, but implement a complete security overhaul. New access codes, new badge system, biometric scanners on sensitive floors. I wasn't taking any chances. Second, we'd prepare for legal battle. Marcus would file restraining orders if necessary, copyright claims on any use of Vantage Holdings' name or materials, and we'd prepare comprehensive documentation of every interaction with my family regarding the company. Third, and this was Sophia's genius, we'd launch a transparency campaign. They tried to control the story by going public. She explained, we're going to do the same thing, but with facts. The next morning, I drove to 510 Park Avenue personally. It was Saturday, early enough that the streets were still quiet. The building was beautiful in the soft morning light. All Art Deco elegance and promise. I wasn't prepared for what I found. The lobby guard, a guy named Evan who'd worked in the building for 15 years and who I'd kept on payroll. I looked uncomfortable when he saw me. Ms. Vance. Oh, I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. What happened? Your mother was here yesterday. She had paperwork. said she had authorization to access the building. She showed me an old document, something from years ago with your signature on it. I didn't know what to do, so I let her in. I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course, Eleanor had kept copies of the original co-founder documents from 8 years ago, before I'd bought her out. To Evan, who didn't know the full legal history, it looked legitimate. Where did she go? Third floor. She and your brother were there for about 3 hours. They measured some spaces, took photos. Miss Vance, if I did something wrong, you didn't know, I said, though my hands were clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. But Evan, effective immediately. The only people authorized to access this building are on this list. I pulled out my phone and showed him the updated security roster Sophia and I had prepared. No exceptions. I don't care what documents anyone shows you. This list or nothing. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. They'd been busy. Tape marked out room divisions on the concrete floor. Post-it notes labeled areas, studio space, storage, gallery wall. They'd even brought in some of Leo's paintings, leaning them against the windows. I called Sophia. They're already moving in. Jesus. Okay. New plan. Marcus needs to file for emergency relief today. We're getting an injunction. I spent the rest of the day at 510 Park Avenue, personally overseeing the removal of every trace of my family's presence. Leo's paintings went into storage. The tape came up. By evening, I'd hired a commercial security firm to station guards at every entrance. 24 hours a day, until the new systems were installed, but Eleanor was just getting started. Sunday morning, my phone exploded. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everywhere I looked, there were photos and videos of me throwing my own mother out of the celebration party. The captions were masterpieces of manipulation. Successful daughter abandons mother who supported her dreams. Family values or corporate greed. Billionaire heiress turns back on struggling family. Billionaire heiress. I'd built Vantage Holdings from nothing, and they were making it sound like I'd inherited everything. Leo posted a long, emotional video about how he'd sacrificed his own dreams to support my business in the early days. How I'd promised him studio space. How I'd changed once I got successful. The comments were brutal. Thousands of people who knew nothing about the situation calling me selfish, heartless, greedy. Then Chloe launched her attack. She posted a video of herself sobbing in her car, mascara running down her carefully contoured cheeks. My sister won't even let her own niece and nephew visit her office. She wailed to her 200,000 followers. She's built this empire and forgotten that family is supposed to matter more than money. My kids ask me why Aunt Alex doesn't love them anymore, and I don't know what to tell them. The comments section exploded. Thousands of strangers who knew nothing about me, about the unpaid rent, about the endless requests for money, all weighing in with their judgment. Heartless. Greedy. This is what happens when women get too successful. Within hours, the local news picked it up. Then the lifestyle bloggers. Then the business influencers who should have known better. The narrative wasn't just building anymore. It was an avalanche. And I was buried underneath it. By Sunday evening, I hadn't slept in 48 hours. My apartment felt like a tomb. I sat on my bedroom floor in the dark, phone in hand, refreshing social media, like it was a form of self-harm. Every new post, every new comment, every new think piece about successful women who abandon their families felt like another cut. Sophia found me there. She'd used her spare key when I stopped answering my phone. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me on the floor and took the phone out of my hands. "We fight back," she said finally. I laughed, and it came out broken. "With what?" "Sophia. The truth. The truth is boring. The truth is, contracts and payment receipts and legal documents, nobody wants to read that when they can watch my sister cry on camera about how I'm a monster. Then we make the truth impossible to ignore." She pulled out her laptop. For the next 4 hours, we built our case for the court of public opinion. Every document, every receipt, every text message. Sophia had been documenting everything. Bless her paranoid heart. She'd kept copies of things I'd forgotten existed. Monday morning. We went nuclear. Sophia uploaded everything to a dedicated page on the Vantage Holdings website. The $15,000 loan agreement from 2016. With Eleanor's signature. The bank transfer from 2017 showing I'd paid her back $23. Wubai. The notarized documents from 2017 removing her from any ownership stake, again with her signature clearly visible. Bank statements showing I'd given Leo $47. 0 inches rent subsidies over 3 years. Screenshots of text conversations where Chloe had asked for money for emergencies that somehow always coincided with new designer handbags showing up on her Instagram. At the top of the page, I posted a statement I'd written at 3 in the morning, when I was too exhausted to lie to myself anymore. For 8 years, I subsidized my family's lifestyle while building Vantage Holdings into a successful company. I did this out of love, out of obligation, and out of a misguided belief that supporting them financially was the same as being a good daughter and sister. What happened at my celebration wasn't a daughter abandoning her family. It was a woman refusing to let her life's work be stolen from her. The documents speak for themselves. Judge, accordingly. The internet loves a plot twist. Within hours, the narrative started to shift. Comment sections that had been crucifying me suddenly filled with people asking uncomfortable questions. Why had Eleanor signed documents removing herself from ownership if she believed she was still co-founder? Why did Leo owe so much in back rent? Why was Chloe complaining about not having access to her rich sister's office when she'd never paid for the space she'd already used? But Eleanor wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Wednesday morning, my phone lit up with a call from Marcus. His voice was tight with controlled anger. They lawyered up. Richard Sterling just filed a lawsuit on Eleanor's behalf. Richard Sterling. The name alone made my stomach drop. Sterling was a legend in Manhattan family law. The kind of attorney who charged $1.500 an hour and was worth every penny. He'd represented a senator's wife in a divorce that made national news. He'd gotten a tech founder's daughter declared legally entitled to half her father's company. He was expensive, ruthless, and very, very good at destroying people in court. The fact that Eleanor could afford him told me everything I needed to know. She'd been planning this for months, maybe years. All those loans she'd never paid back. All that money Leo and Chloe had taken from me. It had been building toward this moment. What are they claiming? I asked, already knowing it would be bad. Everything. They're claiming Eleanor is entitled to a share of Vantage Holdings based on her founding role. They're saying you fraudulently removed her from ownership documents. They're demanding a complete audit of company finances going back 8 years. And Alex. They're filing for an emergency injunction to freeze all of Vantage Holdings' assets pending the outcome of the lawsuit. The room tilted. They can do that. They can try. We have a hearing Monday. Whether a judge grants it depends on how convincing Sterling is. And I'll be honest with you, Alex, this is going to get ugly. They're going to subpoena everything. Every email, every transaction, every conversation you've ever had with your family. They're going to dig through your entire life looking for anything they can use. And they're going to do it all very publicly. I looked out my office window at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, Eleanor was probably celebrating, thinking she'd backed me into a corner, thinking I'd fold under pressure like I always had before. Let them dig. I said, I have nothing to hide. That was mostly true. No business grows as fast as Vantage Holdings without taking some risks, without making decisions that look questionable in hindsight. There were investments that hadn't panned out, partners who'd lost money, deals I wished I'd structured differently. But I'd never broken the law. I'd never lied to investors. I'd never stolen from anyone. My hands weren't clean. But they weren't bloody either. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. 5 days to prepare for the fight of my life. Those 5 days were a special kind of hell. Sterling's team hit us with document requests that would have buried a smaller firm. Thousands of pages of contracts, emails, financial statements. My investors started calling with concerns. 2 major deals that had been nearly closed suddenly fell through when the other parties decided they didn't want to get involved in a legal mess. The press coverage intensified from a drumbeat to a roar. I stopped reading the comments entirely and blocked social media on my phone because I was too weak not to look. Sophia and I practically moved into the office. We worked 18-hour days, building our defense piece by piece. Marcus assembled a legal team that operated on caffeine and righteous anger. We tracked down every witness, every document, every scrap of evidence that proved I'd built Vantage Holdings independently after paying Eleanor back in full the night before the hearing. I gave up on sleep entirely. I stood at my apartment window watching the city lights, and for the first time, I let myself imagine the worst: losing the company, losing my reputation, losing everything I'd spent 8 years building. My name would be mud in the real estate world. Every relationship I'd built, every deal I'd closed, every success I'd achieved, all of it tainted by the specter of family fraud. The fear was suffocating. My phone shattered the silence at 2:17 a.m. Sophia's name on the screen. I found something. Her voice was electric with adrenaline. "Get to the office. Now." I threw on jeans and a sweatshirt and drove through empty Manhattan streets, running 2 red lights because the anticipation was killing me. When I burst into the conference room, Sophia was surrounded by a fortress of laptops and legal pads, her hair wild, her eyes blazing. "Tell me," I demanded. She spun her laptop around. "Eleanor called Leo yesterday afternoon. She didn't hang up properly. The call stayed connected and everything went to voicemail. Our office phone system automatically backs up voicemails to the server. I have access as IT administrator. And Alex, she buried herself." She hit play. My mother's voice filled the room, crystal clear, casually discussing my destruction like she was planning a dinner party. "We don't need to actually win the lawsuit, darling. We just need to create enough pressure that Alexandra settles. A few $1,000,000, and we'll go away quietly. She'll pay it just to make this nightmare stop. You know how she is about conflict." Leo's voice, excited. "What if she calls our bluff?" "She won't." Eleanor's laugh was confident, almost affectionate. "I know my daughter. She hates confrontation. She hates bad press. She'd rather write a check than see her name dragged through the mud. That's why I hired Sterling. His reputation alone will terrify her. We'll get our money and drop the lawsuit before it ever goes to trial." The recording continued for 10 excruciating minutes. They discussed optimal settlement amounts. They talked about which investors to approach to create maximum pressure. Leo suggested leaking stories about my troubled childhood to sympathetic journalists. Eleanor corrected his strategy, explaining how to maximize leverage without overplaying their hand. I listened to the entire recording twice. Then a third time, my mother's voice echoing in my ears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't desperation or hurt feelings. This was calculated extortion, planned and executed with cold precision. "Is this legal?" I whispered. "Can we use it?" Marcus says yes. "It's a gray area, but it's admissible. This is our smoking gun. Alex, this proves fraud, extortion, and abuse of legal process. This doesn't just win us the case. This destroys them." I stared at the audio file on the screen. "Play it again." Marcus arrived at 7 a.m., looking like he'd teleported straight from his bed. He listened to the recording once, and I watched his face transform from exhausted to predatory. "This changes everything," he said softly. "They just handed us their heads on a platter." Monday morning arrived with the weight of destiny. The courthouse steps were a madhouse. News crews, photographers, reporters shouting questions that turned into white noise. I saw Eleanor arrive in a black suit that probably cost as much as a used car, playing her role perfectly. The grieving mother, the woman wronged. Leo and Chloe flanked her like bodyguards, all 3 of them wearing matching expressions of wounded dignity. I wore my navy suit again. My armor, my war paint. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. I recognized investors, business partners, journalists I'd granted interviews to. They'd all come to watch the Vance family civil war play out in real time. Judge Sarah Harding entered, and the room fell silent. She was in her late 50s, with steel gray hair and a reputation for suffering fools. I'd done my research. She'd built her career prosecuting white-collar crime before being appointed to the bench. She didn't like liars, and she didn't like people who wasted her time. Richard Sterling rose to give his opening statement, and I had to admit, the man was good. His voice carried the perfect note of righteous indignation as he painted his picture of maternal sacrifice betrayed. Your Honor, this case is a tragedy as old as civilization itself. A mother helps her daughter build something beautiful, only to be cast aside when that daughter decides she no longer needs her family. Eleanor Vance gave her daughter seed capital when no bank would. She co-signed loans when no investor believed in Alexandra's vision. She provided guidance, support, and unconditional love. Now, flush with success, Alexandra Vance has decided to rewrite history. She claims her mother was never truly a founder, that the documents are clear, that she owes her family nothing, but blood isn't a contract. Your Honor, family isn't a transaction. Eleanor Vance asks only for what's fair recognition of her contribution and a share of what they built together. I watched Judge Harding's face. She was listening, but her expression gave nothing away. Then Marcus stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply started presenting facts with the methodical precision of a surgeon making cuts. Your Honor, let's be very clear about what this case is actually about. In 2016, Eleanor Vance loaned her daughter $15. Ling ling ling. In 2017, Alexandra Vance repaid that loan in full. Plus $8. 500 inches interest. For a total of $23. Wu Bei. We have the bank transfer. In 2017, Eleanor Vance signed notarized documents removing herself from any ownership stake in Vantage Holdings. We have those documents, with her signature, filed with the state. For the next 8 years, Alexandra Vance built Vantage Holdings into a successful company valued at over $200 million. She did this through her own work, her own vision, and her own capital. Mrs. Eleanor Vance contributed nothing to this success beyond the initial $15,000 loan, which was repaid in full with interest. He pulled up documents on the courtroom screens. Bank statements, notarized papers, a complete paper trail showing exactly what had happened and when. Your Honor, this is not a family dispute. This is an attempted theft. Ms. Vance paid her mother back in full. She did everything legally and correctly. What we're seeing now is buyer's remorse. Mrs. Eleanor Vance sees how successful her daughter has become and wants a piece of it. Despite having signed away any claims years ago, Sterling countered with emotional appeals, witnesses who testified about Eleanor's early involvement in Vantage Holdings, but Marcus was ready with documents showing the exact dates when Eleanor's involvement ended, the exact payments made, the exact legal steps taken. Then Marcus pulled out his weapon. Your Honor, I'd like to submit new evidence. A recording made yesterday, in which Mrs. Eleanor Vance discusses her true motivations for this lawsuit with her son, Leo Vance. Sterling shot to his feet. Objection. We weren't informed of any new evidence. The evidence was discovered last night. Marcus said calmly. It's directly relevant to the question of fraud and extortion. Judge Harding considered. I'll allow it. The recording played in the courtroom. Eleanor's voice filled the space, discussing settlements and pressure tactics, and how to manipulate me into paying them to go away. I watched my mother's face. For the first time in my life, I saw Eleanor Vance without her mask. She wasn't wounded or maternal or hurt. She was calculating, realizing how badly she'd miscalculated. The recording ended. The silence was deafening. Judge Harding spoke directly to Eleanor. Mrs. Vance, is this your voice on the recording? Eleanor opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Mrs. Vance, I asked you a question. Yes, Eleanor finally whispered. But Your Honor, I can explain. I don't think you can. Judge Harding interrupted. What I've heard today is a clear attempt to extort money from your daughter using the legal system as a weapon. The documents presented by Ms. Alexandra Vance clearly show that all debts were repaid and all ownership claims properly terminated. This lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. With prejudice. That meant Eleanor couldn't refile. It was over. But Judge Harding wasn't done. Furthermore, Mrs. Vance, you and your legal counsel are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Ms. Alexandra Vance and Vantage Holdings in defending against this frivolous lawsuit. I'm also issuing a permanent restraining order preventing you, your son Leo Vance, and your daughter Chloe Vance from contacting Miss Salas, Alexandra Vance, or interfering with her business in any way. Any violation will result in immediate arrest for contempt of court. Eleanor was crying now. Real tears for once. But she's my daughter. Then you should have acted like a mother, Judge Harding said coldly. Court dismissed. I walked out of the courthouse into a wall of cameras and questions. I didn't stop. Didn't comment. I just got into the car where Sophia was waiting. We won, she said. We won, I repeated. And then I started laughing. Or maybe crying. I'm still not sure which. Maybe both. The aftermath was swift and brutal for the Vance family. Eleanor's legal fees bankrupted her. The upscale apartment she'd been living in, the one I'd been helping her pay for, was lost. She moved to a small studio in Queens. Leo's reputation in the art world, which had already been shaky, completely collapsed. No gallery would touch him after the lawsuit became public. He got a job teaching art classes at a community center. Chloe's marriage fell apart. Brad, it turned out, had been on the verge of leaving her for years. And the public embarrassment of the lawsuit was the final straw. She moved back in with Eleanor. Her influencer career evaporated when brands discovered she'd been part of the attempted shakedown. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. That's the thing nobody tells you about cutting off toxic family. You think you'll feel vindicated, triumphant. Instead, you mostly feel sad for the relationship that never existed, and relieved that you finally stopped pretending it did. Vantage Holdings recovered quickly. The investors who'd stuck with me through the lawsuit became my strongest advocates, spreading the word that I was someone who stood by her principles. New opportunities opened up. Within 6 months, we'd expanded into Boston and Philadelphia. The crown jewel, 510 Park Avenue, became our headquarters. I kept my office on the 20th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. I never heard from Eleanor directly again. Sometimes I'd get word through former family friends that she was telling people I'd chosen money over family, that I'd abandoned her in her time of need. I let her have her narrative. People who knew the truth knew the truth. People who didn't weren't worth explaining it to. A year after the lawsuit, I established the Women in Power Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to helping female entrepreneurs get started without having to compromise their ownership or control. I'd seen too many women give away pieces of their companies to family members, partners, or investors who then used those stakes to control and manipulate them. My fund provided capital with clear terms, mentorship, and legal support. The first recipient was a 25-year-old woman named Maria who wanted to start a construction company. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry, ambitious, and vulnerable to people who'd try to take advantage of her generosity. I made sure she had the resources and knowledge I wish I'd had. I also started therapy. Dr. Richardson was patient with my insistence that I was fine, that I'd handled everything, that I didn't need help processing. It took 6 months before I could talk about Eleanor without my jaw clenching. It took another 6 months before I could acknowledge how much I'd wanted her approval, even knowing she'd never really give it. She taught you to measure your worth by how much you could give her. Dr. Richardson said during one session, unlearning that isn't weakness. It's survival. I learned to set boundaries in other areas of my life too. I stopped answering emails after 10 p.m. I took vacations. I dated. Though I was cautious about letting anyone too close, trust had become a precious commodity. 2 years after the lawsuit, I installed a small plaque in the lobby of 510 Park Avenue. It read, "Boundaries build empires." Sophia asked me about it. That's a hell of a message. It's the truth, I said. I spent years thinking that generosity and sacrifice meant letting people take from me endlessly. I learned the hard way that you can't build anything lasting without protecting what's yours. I still think about Eleanor sometimes. I wonder if she ever understood what she did wrong, or if she still sees herself as the victim in this story. I wonder if she tells people that her ungrateful daughter abandoned her, or if she's capable of acknowledging her role in destroying our relationship. Mostly, though, I think about the woman I've become. I built Vantage Holdings with my own 2 hands. My own mind. My own determination. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody can take it away. And every time I walk into my office on the 20th floor and see my name on that door, I remember that I didn't just save my company. I saved myself. Standing up to Eleanor wasn't just about the money or the business. It was about finally seeing clearly. It was about recognizing that love shouldn't cost you your dignity, your security, or your dreams. It was about understanding that some people will take everything you offer and still demand more. And that saying no to them isn't cruelty. It's self-preservation. I'm 33 now. Vantage Holdings is valued at over $200 million. I have a team of 60 employees who trust me. I have investors who believe in me. I have friends who support me without expecting anything in return. I have a life I built on my own terms. And I have the knowledge that when everything was on the line, when I had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping myself, I chose myself. That's worth more than any building, any company, any amount of money could ever be. So let me ask you this. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting a relationship? Have you ever realized that the person you were sacrificing for would never do the same for you? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about standing up, setting boundaries, and building the life you deserve. Because your empire is waiting. Don't let anyone steal it.